All right, everybody. We are back again for season 2 of the Coach's Compass. Again, don't remember what episode it is because we just continue to roll. Continue to bring on cool guests from all across the world. It's your boy, Coach Coop, reporting live from the US of A. Right, my boy, Coach Jay, can't be with us today because still figuring out retirement, still figuring out the time schedule, all that different stuff. Now, remember, hit that like, subscribe, comment button down below so we can have this thing continue to grow. And make sure you turn on your alerts to see when we drop a new episode each and every week. But like I said, always another cool guest with us today. We got Coach Andrew. He's the director of baseball performance out of the University of Virginia, previously at Elon, TCU, Millersville, and Villanova. Also a former baseball player himself, like he said, many people might not know, but at Eastern University, right? Coach, thank you and welcome to the Coach's Compass.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Bro, so what got you into the field of performance, strength and conditioning? And obviously, you choose baseball route because a former baseball player yourself.
Yeah, I was never the best baseball player, right? I played Division III baseball and was never the best baseball player, but one thing that I could always attribute to some of my success was the weight room, and using that piece of my development was important for my holistic development. And then wanting to be a strength coach was how it stemmed from that, right? Because I wanted to be a strength coach. I wanted to help out others because the weight room helped me out in my development. So I wanted to do the same for others. And like I said, I was never the best baseball player, but the weight room was a place that I excelled in when I was in college, and wanted to do the same and help others in that aspect as well, while still staying in the game, right? Because I wanted to stay in the game, but didn't know enough about pitching and to be a pitching coach. But I was interested in learning about strength and conditioning. I did an internship at Villanova, and it stemmed from there.
So, okay, first, why only strength and conditioning for baseball, right? Instead of, broadening it out and getting into like multiple other sports, like maybe football, basketball, volleyball, and all that other stuff. But also, what is because I think we all know nowadays, you see it on social media, right? The big performance centers for all the baseball players, right? What is the difference in training for baseball comparatively to the other sports?
Yeah. So the first question, I'm going to say, like, I knew I wanted to get into strength and conditioning for baseball because obviously I was a baseball player. I could relate to baseball players a little bit easier than I could a different sport. Funny enough, though, my first internship at Villanova was football only. So I got a little bit of taste of what football strength and conditioning was like. Shout out Mike Tucker. He was my mentor at Villanova, who led me through that internship. And football strength and conditioning, I think, is a little bit different. I think it's the biggest groups you're going to see. You're going to have groups upwards of 60 people at a time. There's a ton of organization that goes on. There's a ton of prep work that needs to go into every session to make sure each and every guy is getting the most out of that session. And so I think, candidly, I think everyone needs to do a football internship, because if you can organize a group of 60, you can organize a group of 20 or 30, and it's just easier. And understanding the football aspect was important for my development. And the second question, like, why, what's different about baseball? I think baseball development is unique in the sense that it's a sport that, it's not like football where there's not a total amount of yardage for football. Wide receiver is and a cornerback are covering way more yardage than maybe a baseball player. The time motion demands are a little bit different, and the game asks a little bit different from a physical standpoint than another sport. We throw med balls, we sprint, we jump, we get really strong. But I'll tell you what, those aspects of what I just told you, I could put in any program, and I would probably consider it a successful program, even for soccer or lacrosse or football. If you're sprinting, you're jumping, and you're throwing, and you're focusing on getting really strong, that's a pretty good holistic program. I don't consider myself like a baseball strength coach. I'm just a strength coach or a performance coach that works with baseball. And I'd like to think that if you gave me a soccer team, I'd be able to reverse engineer the sport and say, okay, how can I best prepare these athletes for practice so that the coach can prepare them for the game?
For sure. I mean, like you said, you started off at football at your internship, right? So you saw that what it took, right? But obviously, former baseball player yourself, what are you like kind of implementing in your programs now that you kind of wish you had when you were going into to college, and that you're seeing, some of these athletes come into college that they're lacking.
Yeah. Well, so we just had a camp this past weekend. It's funny you said that because we just had a camp this past weekend, and we had over 100 high school kids at this camp, and a lot of them ask me the same questions. What's something that you wish you knew when you were in high school getting recruited to go to college, or what's one thing you wish that you knew when you were in college when you were trying to train to throw your hardest or be physically ready for pitching? And I think the one thing that I would say is obviously I didn't know anything about sprinting. I didn't know anything about jumping and throwing med balls, and I was trying to get as big as possible. That's what I was trying to do when I was in college. I was trying to get as big as possible, and my mobility suffered, and I didn't understand like how it went into my pitching schedule because the pitching schedule is crazy. If someone throws on Friday, his schedule is going to be a little bit different strength wise and throwing wise with a guy that throws on Saturday or Sunday. Those two schedules are completely different. They lift on completely separate days based around their throwing schedule. So I didn't know any of that. And so I was lifting on any day that I felt like it and then throwing on any day that I felt like it. And it wasn't efficient and it wasn't effective. And it's probably why half the time I didn't feel good when I was throwing because I was just worried about lifting weights. So that's kind of the point that I would emphasize. And then as a coach, understanding that there's multiple avenues to get to a certain outcome. Early in my career, and I would still consider myself early in my career, but when I first started, I would watch what Villanova did and I would say, okay, that's the way to do it. Not even thinking that there's ways that I could spin it that's still the same template that I learned at Villanova, but you can get to the same outcome. And for instance, like there's 5-3-1, there's triphasic periodization, there's all these different ways of programming that get to the same goal, and there's multiple ways to do it. And when I first started, it was like, all right, this is the way that I have to do it. But the more that I learn and the more that I grow, the more that I see that there's different ways to do it. Like I've been fortunate that I've been under some really great mentors in this field. I've taken a little bit from all of them and kind of put my own twist on it. And guess what? The goal is the same, right? Every strength coach wants to get guys bigger, faster, stronger. But how they do it is a little bit different.
Yeah. Who are some of the mentors, right? Who are some of the people that you're using to hold yourself accountable and continue to learn
Yeah.
from and continue to grow in this field? Because I think that's a hard part for a lot of us coaches that are you're just now starting, been in the industry for a little bit, or are now kind of seen as OGs in this thing, right? Who are kind of people that you're looking up to?
So when I was at Villanova, obviously Mike Tucker he was an instrumental piece in my development as a young strength coach, first starting out. When I was at Millersville, I was under Kyle Regensburg, and actually Millersville was probably the most pivotal time in my strength and conditioning career because I worked with 19 sports, and it was a Division II school. It was myself and Kyle, and we had 19 sports, and we had to divvy it up. And so I worked with every single sport. Again, going back to my first point, why I don't consider myself a baseball strength coach. I worked with every sport: wrestling, both soccers, both lacrosses, swimming and diving, both golfs, baseball, football. I worked with football. I worked with basketball, men's and women's. Like every single sport you can imagine, I worked with at Millersville and programmed for them as well. So that was pivotal because I was on the floor coaching for 8 to 10 hours a day. It was awesome. It was what was best for my development. If I was 22, 23 years old coaching 2 hours a day, I'm not getting many reps doing that. But if I'm on the floor from 6 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the evening, and then I take a 2 hour break to go home before class at 6 o'clock, that's a full day, but I'm getting a lot out of it, right? And so that was pivotal. And then I took an unpaid internship at TCU because I wanted to learn under Zach Dakin. And I just basically told him, I said, listen, I want to know what you know. I don't have to make any money. Just let me be your intern for 3 months. Right? I just want to be a summer intern. I want to know what you know. Fortunately enough, it ended up turning into a full-time job for me. And so I was there for another year and a half to 2 years. And then I went to Elon and worked under Nick DeMarco, who's one of the greatest minds in the field. And now I'm here at University of Virginia. So those are some of my mentors: Mike Tucker, Kyle Regensburg, Zach Dakin, and Nick DeMarco.
Is it better now though? I mean, I know you said you enjoyed the 8 hours of being on the floor and all that stuff, but Do you enjoy having a little bit more free time now?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I had this conversation again last weekend. It's like, yeah, I only have one team at Virginia, but what's crazy about it is that because you have one team and you only have 40 guys, there's so much more work that goes into every single guy. And so when I was at Millersville, you basically have a template that you're spinning off into a lacrosse program, a baseball program, a football program, all off of the same template. When I was at TCU, I had swimming and diving, and I assisted with baseball. And now I have one sport, but you're going way more in depth with every guy. So you have like 3 or 4 different programs that you're running at the same time. You have a foundation block, you have an intermediate group, you have an advanced group, and then based off of that, there's little modifications that you make based off of the conversations you have with people like the coaching staff, people like the nutritionist and dietitian. And all of those conversations equate to what goes into every program individually. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I write 40 different programs. I just don't. There's not enough hours in the day to do that. But I have
Heck
four
no.
different programs. I have 4 different programs that I kind of spin off based off of what every guy needs. So
Yeah, for sure. I think a huge question though that I mean, especially being in the private sector and then, talking to parents and now talking to somebody like yourself, is what they're doing now with travel ball and specializing so early in just one specific sport. Like take baseball, because you got a lot of kids now that are playing little league. Just they got pitching coaches, they got a hitting coach, and they got a strength and conditioning coach at like 7, 8 years old, right? Is this doing too much? Like, is it hurting the athlete in their careers and longevity? Like, have you seen it kind of create that burnout with a lot of those kids that have done that for so long when they get to the college level?
dude, it's crazy. Baseball, especially now, we have these camps and we host tournaments at our field, and the amount of games that go on year round in baseball is, I think, absurd, because the more that these travel ball teams and organizations become popular, the less kids are training, because they're going to Georgia, they're going to Florida, they're going to Tennessee, they're going to Alabama to play in these tournaments, and it doesn't end. I'll give you a model, right? They play their high school season. Well, as soon as they're done their high school season in June, they start their summer ball circuit. And that summer ball circuit, there are kids that, and I'm telling you this because I just had conversations with them last week. There are kids that are away from their house in the summer for up to 10 to 14 days, because they're going from one tournament to the next, to the next, to the next. And they are away from their house for 10 to 14 days at a time. So I can't imagine they're getting very good training sessions in when they're playing that amount of games in that little amount of time and they're away from their house. You go to August, then they start school in August. And maybe some of them are training, but others are playing on other travel teams from September until November. And then you come back in December. Really, and December is the perfect game tournament. And so that's the biggest tournament in the calendar year for high school prospects. There's a ton of coaches that go to this event. And then January and February, maybe you might have 2 months to train to get ready for your high school season, but it's crazy. And so it's just a yearly thing, right? I'm sure that the same as you could be said in the basketball with AAU ball, but man, like I know the baseball world specifically. When I was in high school, I was playing like Legion ball and traveling like 20 minutes to a game from my hometown, right? And I was
Yeah.
coming back to my house the same day. These kids are playing on like travel ball circuits, which is like, hey, tip my hat to you if you can do it, right? But when you're in high school, a lot of these kids are coming in underdeveloped physically. And the lowest hanging fruit, I tell these kids all the time that the most successful athletes freshman year are the ones who are physically developed. Everyone that comes to Virginia and plays baseball can hit a 96-mile-an-hour fastball. That's not the difference. The difference is how physical are you, and if your body can withstand the demands of playing 55 games in a short window of time. So that's what it comes down to for me.
How do you get parents to understand that though, right? Because I mean, obviously these little leagues and these travel ball teams, fall ball, all that stuff have found a way, right, to get parents to sign their kids up and buy into it. But how do we, even for myself, like how do we get them to understand that, hey, it's okay to like, all right, let's play that high school season and then like get maybe a little bit of summer ball, but like we don't need a whole year of like 200 plus games. Like you're just like we're hurting them in the end.
Yeah. It comes down to educating, and that's why a lot of the conversations with the parents is like, I'm telling you from my perspective, the biggest difference between seniors in high school that come into college and seniors in high school that come into college and don't play is how physical they are. Like it's just, it is what it is. It's, you look at guys in the ACC who are starting on Friday nights and Saturday nights and Sunday afternoons, and they're not, a buck 70, most of them.
Yeah.
It is what it is. You need to look like a grown man to compete in this league. And a lot of kids they have aspirations to play in the ACC, and all you have to do is go on TV and turn on the College World Series and look at the guys that are on the mound and look at the guys that are in the starting lineup. I think I read a tweet that the average weight of a guy in the College World Series this last year was 209 pounds. It was the average weight. So we take a lot of pride in our nutrition here at Virginia, and the conversations with our dietitian are constant. And we have different weight gain guys. We have guys that need to gain weight that are on specific meal plans. And it's about educating that, hey, your body needs to be durable and resilient for a baseball season. It's one of the most grueling seasons in college athletics. And so
Yeah.
your body needs to be able to handle that. But going back to what you said, it stems from conversations and educating parents as to what the difference maker is going to be. Like, that's great if your kid is committed. It's awesome. But now he needs to focus on getting stronger, because when you look at the roster, these are grown men. And not to mention the transfer portal nowadays, you are now competing against guys who are fifth years, who've been in the game for a longer period of time. They are already developed. So that makes an even greater point to get in the weight room earlier, because now you are competing against guys who are even older than you.
That transfer portal is something serious now because it's
It's
looking like it's not going anywhere anytime
the
soon.
Wild West. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Wild.
the game has completely changed. So what keeps you motivated and wanting to continue to learn more and move forward in this field? And what's your why behind being able to inspire others?
Yeah. What keeps me motivated is really my why of I think one of the reasons why this job is so great for me and working for the staff is because we share a similar vision of trying to create grown men. We're trying to build men. And when you have an 18-year-old, you see him over the course of 3 or 4 years develop, and you want to teach him lessons like trying to hold himself accountable and being disciplined and consistent with your actions, and treating the game right and treating others right. And all of those lessons can kind of get molded into our program. And there's lessons that we teach guys. So that's really my why. It's crazy because it's not even, I want to get guys stronger, I want to get guys faster. Like, that's awesome. I love it. But and that's what I love to do. But on a daily basis, what gets me up is trying to build a human being, and trying to get to build and understand and teach them lessons like holding each other accountable. Like, what is it like to work in a team setting? What does it mean to show up on time? We have 5 core principles in our program, and a lot of them stem around not even baseball related. It's like showing up to things on time. It's taking care of the facility, taking care of your studies, treating others with respect. Very basic core principles that, if executed well, like, you're going to grow as a human being.
I mean, it's important, man. I mean, think about it. Like for yourself, and I know for myself, right? Sports don't last for forever, right? You can play the game for a certain amount of time and it's gone, right? What do you do afterwards, right? So I think it's so important for us on the coaching side, like what are we implementing in these kids' lives that's going to help them carry on past the sport and become, good fathers, husbands, just good people in society. Like, how are we doing our job to help create a better society for the next ones to come around? And I think that's super dope that you're doing that, with your guys there and not just worried about how well do they perform on the field, but how well they're performing outside of that.
And that's why I like the college setting so much, because you get these kids when they're 17, and sometimes they just don't know any better, and they're around you more they are their parents
Yeah.
when they're at that age. So these kids are these parents are entrusting us with their child, that when their child graduates or when their child goes and gets drafted, that they understand these concepts. And so that's why the staff is awesome to work for, because that they share the same vision. Coach O'Connor, my head coach, is a leader, one of the greatest leaders I've ever seen, and he has a way of building young men. And the proof is in the pudding. He has had former players that have gone on to have their own businesses, and they've been successful as parents, and they've been successful in other avenues, not to mention all the guys that have gotten drafted being out of the University of Virginia. But it's the proof is there. He's just a builder of young men. So being able to learn from him on a daily basis is incredible. It's very, very fortunate to be able to do it.
So what is something you would want us to ask our next guest?
Something that you can ask your next guest. What's one thing that 99% of the field believes to be true that you think is false? I think that's a great question. I'm always interested to hear what people say for that.
And what's your answer?
My answer would be, just because a guy's limiting factor, just because a guy has a limiting factor doesn't mean that is what's affecting his skill. And I say that, and I'm going to give you an example. So, if a guy is deemed as tight, if a guy does a movement assessment and he fails the movement assessment, like he's tight, we need to give more T-spine mobility. We need to give him more shoulder mobility. Look at the skill and see how it affects the limitation. So if the guy throws 98 miles an hour, but he's tight, I'm not going to touch him because he throws 98 miles an hour. And I learned that because I've had an athlete before that has been the exact case that I just explained to you. He was one of the stiffest athletes you've ever seen, but he threw 97. So my first initial thought was, okay, I need to get him more mobile. That's going to get him to 98. But the juice isn't worth the squeeze. He already throws 97 miles an hour. So you look at the skill and see how it affects the limitation. Don't look at the limitation and see how it affects the skill. Because with that athlete, he throws 98 miles an hour. His body obviously sequences itself well enough with the state of his body. He's already stiff, but maybe the reason why he throws 98 is because he's stiff. If you get him more mobile, he might not be as efficient with his kinetic chain, and he might drop velocity down to 95. You have no idea. So just because a guy is deemed as tight, doesn't mean that we need to get him more loose. You look at how his skill plays on the field. If he throws 97, 98, I'm not touching him. If he's a batter and his swing is fine, mechanically with the hitting coach, he thinks the swing is fine. But if the guy's hitting 350, 375, 380, don't touch him, right?
Let him be. It's so working.
Yeah, I think sometimes less is more. Don't look at the limitation and see how it affects the skill. I think look at the skill and say, okay, how can we go about trying to make him more efficient energy-wise?
Coach, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for chopping it up and keeping it 100 and talking all things baseball, man, and not just baseball, everything in the strength and conditioning field, especially for the college side. We appreciate your time, man, and thank you so much.
Yeah, man. All love. Appreciate you having me on.